thought we were going to hear something about an update on the report.
It's on the agenda, but we don't have the report. And so we'll talk about that in a few minutes.
So we are now recording.
This is
And,
officially an open public meeting, although it looks like it's just us, but this will be posted on the town website. Could I have a motion to waive the reading of the governor's rules for open meeting requirements?
So moved.
Second,
Second,
all in favor?
aye.
Thank you.
Diana, you got to do a roll call, sorry.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just go through based on the order in which I see you. Bill Greeter,
Just a facilitator, not a voter, thank you.
Bob Kucharvi. Bob,
He's frozen.
he's frozen. We'll come back to him. Peter Heffenreffer,
Here.
Leslie Forbes,
Yes,
David Madigan,
Yes.
Michael Maynard,
Aye.
Lars Soderberg, Bruce Mandel,
Aye.
Tom Erickson,
Good evening.
Bob Kucharvi. Bob, you're frozen.
Oh, he just blinked. He's okay.
Bob will move it.
Okay, we'll take that as a present. We'll have a slight,
who else is talking on this? There's a whole conversation going on that I hear.
Yeah, can everybody check their mute? We got some background from somebody.
It's a delay.
Tom, can you hit your mute?
Here.
that did it.
Okay,
Okay, the agenda was posted on the meeting notice. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda? Somebody raise their hand. Michael, second. Lars, all in favor?
roll call.
Roll call. Okay, you can just raise your hand if you'd like. Is that all right, Bob? All in favor? Bob, Peter, Leslie, David, Michael, Lars, Bruce, Tom. Thank you. Just before we get to the density study, I wanted to let you know that I had a conversation with Lauren O'Donnell, who is on the board of the Fishers Landing Association, and went through with her so what we are doing in terms of the density study. And she had a lot of very good comments that I will share with you as we go along. But one of the best things that she said is that she is happy to communicate our information to the Fishers Landing members, whether it is asking for their input on a survey. I'm getting lots of back.
Yeah, there's something's off here.
Yeah, because we were getting it, Diana, when we were all muted, when you were the only one unmuted.
I think it's a delay in Diana's conversation or a repeat.
All right,
I will try not to have to talk too much then.
Okay, so it's not there currently.
I think it's not because Diana hasn't said anything in a long time.
I will try again. Briefly, Lauren O'Donnell said she would be happy to be the focal point to communicate and gather input with any of the Fishers Landing residents, such as if we want to do a survey, she would send it out to them. And she said they are starving for information about what's going on, and anything that I would like her to relay to the Fishers Landing board or to the members in their newsletter, which she writes, she will be happy to send forth. So I viewed that as a very positive, supportive way to get the Fishers Landing community involved. And I think she was going to try to join us on this meeting today. With that, Leslie, maybe if you could just make a couple of comments on the density study.
Yes, happy to. I will begin with, we don't have the report today that principal has offered. It will come sometime after January 17th. We don't have Emily here today, but I will say that she and Julia have been in constant contact with principal, providing them with information that they need and asking questions, and she's staying active on it for sure. The good news is that from the preliminary data that we have received, it appears that our concerns about increased density coming if sewer should extend to Madaket, that there is support, data support and analysis support for that concern. Once we get the report, we sure intend to weave it into the survey to seek community input. However, we think that we should continue along developing the survey in today's meeting so that we don't slow up the process anymore, and that we will be able to get some points from principal to weave into the survey to start our community outreach. In line with the fact that we want to do community outreach, we're thinking that no one knows where COVID's going to go next and when it's going to clear up, so that our community outreach may have to be done remotely. And this would involve a webinar approach where we would have certain panel members, and then people in the audience would be able to raise their hand and ask questions. It would be recordable, and it's the way that the select board meets now, and the way most of the town departments meet. It allows for input, it records, and it certainly would allow for people who weren't on island, should we be able to schedule an in-person meeting, to participate. So there's some positives to this, and there are some negatives as well. I mean, we do like the idea of an in-person meeting. We just don't know whether we'll be able to do that safely. With that in mind, to create a Zoom webinar has some extra financial cost involved with it. So we were thinking that perhaps that it would be a good idea for this group to think ahead to making a grant request to MCA to cover the cost of in-person meetings or Zoom webinar meetings. And that today would be a good day to put a motion forward to get everybody's vote on it, so that when the time comes, we will have that piece of housekeeping taken care of. Comments?
Leslie, do you know approximately how much it would cost to do, let's say, 2 of these sessions?
We're thinking, Bill is in charge of our Zoom account, I believe, and he's thinking that we might have to upgrade, which would be an additional $80, $79 a month, or we could do a year-round upgrade. The idea we had that that Bill worked out and I agree with is that the grant request to MCA would be for a dollar amount not to exceed $800. Does that answer your question?
Did you say 800 or 100?
800.
800, okay, that makes sense.
I just think that might be a little low, only because if we have to use NCTV to help manage it or something that you don't think we need to. Bill has his hand up. Bill, do you have a question?
Yeah, just not a question, just an update. I actually just got off the phone with Zoom Help Desk. The plan for the $79 a month would be up to 500 participants. We would be able to do that on our own without NCTV.
Oh,
And everybody would get the notice the same way we do with this. But as you log into the thing, instead of being admitted from the waiting room, you would be elevated as a panelist. And so we would identify the people, the map group would all be panelists, and they would have full video, audio capabilities. And then audience members, which would be up to minus the map group, whatever that number is, the delta of the 500, would raise their hand. They'd be recognized, which would then allow them to speak. And then when they were through, they'd be unrecognized, so they'd have to raise their hand again.
Bill,
that's terrific that we could do it just on our own.
Bill,
And
question.
that $800 would be at the outside of a year's service. If at the end of 6 months, the map group decided they didn't need that any longer, they could just let MCA know, and MCA would kill that account addition or not.
Bruce has a question.
Bill, if we do this, how many times, for example, a month or during the period, would we be allowed to have a session?
About a dozen.
A dozen? Well, would it be possible then to use some of those sessions, for example, for the annual MCA meeting, or even better, could the MAP group use them for forums in conjunction with the survey? For example, to have a forum on density, to have a forum on another subject such as swimming pools or zoning like that. Could we use it for that purpose as well? There are other communities that have used a forum format in the past in person, but this might be an opportunity for us.
I think that's a great suggestion and sounds consistent with what Leslie was saying.
I think it's really short money for the possibilities that are out there.
Say that again, Joe?
It would certainly meet the charge, I think. It's up for you folks to decide, but I believe it certainly meets the charge that the Plus department has laid out as the process that the MAP group needs to do.
Mhm.
It's community, it allows us to do a lot of community input, reaching out and receiving input back.
Just a quick question, Leslie, do we probably don't have this yet, but any sense on timing when we'd want to even do this? I'm sure that's not baked into anything yet, but I mean, will it be, do we think we can do this within the next 3 or 4 months?
Yeah,
I
we just
sure
have
hope so.
We just have to upgrade the account. Once we add it to the MCA adds it to their existing account, it takes effect right away.
No, I mean the other side of I get the technology part of it. I mean, when would we want to conduct these sessions?
That's, well, the very first thing would be once we get our survey.
Okay.
We need to I mean, that's the first thing I see that we would be soliciting, reaching out to the community and soliciting feedback from. There'll be questions that come
I
from.
agree. I mean, I think that the survey gives you raw material, which we can then incorporate into some of the questions. It's hard to go at this yet until we have some sense as to what the survey is telling us.
So this would be post-survey. So as part of the survey, we'd say, join us, on XX date, where we'll review some of the results and answer your questions. Is that the thought?
Well, actually, I think once we get the information from principal, that kicks us off.
That
Yeah,
could
I'm
be a
sorry.
community
That's
presentation.
what I meant if I misspoke.
Okay.
But-
I think I misspoke too.
Lars, do you have a copy of the forum format that was used? I'm trying to think which community did that. Help me out, Leslie. Was it Tom Nevers?
I think it was Tom Nevers. I think in their
I have a
write-up, they had
copy
a
of
lot
it,
of
Lars,
forums.
and I'll dig it out and send it to you, but there were a series of forums that they held, maybe 6 of them, 7 of them, and there were 2 on one subject and the rest were on various subjects. And I think some of them would not apply to us, like some of their issues in the other communities don't apply to Madiket. But
Bruce,
if
were
you
these
don't have
online
that, I'll dig it
forums?
out and send it to you.
Were these online forums or in-person forums?
They were in-person forums.
Okay.
I have a copy of the Tom Nevers questionnaire and newsletter. That's this newsletter from November of 2006. And they called them focus groups. They had a focus group on housing, a focus group on land use, a focus group on circulation, on open space and recreation, obviously all the things that are categories of the area plan.
So it's Tom Nevers?
Correct.
Okay,
Well-
I'll try to dig that out, and if I have it in an electronic form, I'll send it to everybody that's on this call today.
Thank you, Bruce. Well, as we have talked before, it is important for the credibility of the Madiket area plan for us to show as much community input as possible. So I think that using these webinar tools plus survey questions will all be a really good thing for us to be able to get as many people involved as possible. And then we can have that as addendum to our Madiket area plan to show how much community input we've gotten. So do we have, Peter, did you have a question?
Yeah, just quickly on this issue of which comes first, a little bit of a chicken and the egg thing. If the survey is ultimately where the data is going to come from that we're going to use to convince the town that we have Madiket behind us, do these Zoom meetings, informational meetings, should they in fact be viewed as preceding the survey? I didn't hear a final answer on that. I can see it going either way, but perhaps they can be used to inform people so that when they take the survey, they're better informed as opposed to the other way around. As long as
You
I
might
understood
even
the
be
confusion.
able to do both, Peter. You could do an informational session, send out the survey, and then have a discussion afterward if you really wanted to. The beauty of these things is you can convene them so easily.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize they could take so many people. I don't imagine if with even a hot topic and everyone invited, we'd ever have 500 people. But to know we could accommodate, almost unlimited. We don't have to worry about space and so forth. And you can put them together pretty quickly too.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we can do both, and I think they're not exclusive of each other. I think
No.
one would set up the other, and I even think an MCA annual meeting would attract more attendees than an in-person meeting might.
I think, again, given the fact that these shouldn't be enormously management intensive or labor intensive, the more you did, whether we did an informational, then a survey, and then a follow-up, whatever, the more we do, it really only supports the democratic notion that the town's looking for.
Mhm.
Exactly, and if you're going to have a forum, you could use the survey format to send out some preliminary information about the upcoming forum so that people could perhaps read it and see what it is and form some questions and opinions, and then have the forum for their participation.
No.
Why don't we
With a chat function and the hands up function, there are ways to actually ask questions and get and tabulate answers. I think it would be rather troubling to think about doing it with 500 people, but I think the practical reality is if we got 50 or 75 people on a call, it would be amazing.
Yeah,
But that's all useful.
absolutely.
How about if I put a motion on the table? The motion being that Madaket area plan apply for a grant from MCA to fund Zoom webinars not to exceed $800.
So move. Second.
All in favor? I'll roll call it again. Michael, yes. David, yes. Lars, yes. Bruce, yes. Bob? Leslie, yes. Peter? Yes. Bob, yes. Thank you. Tom Erickson, yes?
Earth to Tom.
Okay. That's great. And then subsequent to all of your emails since our last informal meeting and discussion about survey questions, I asked David if he would help consolidate your thoughts and put them into, just like with a fresh set of eyes, to take the survey questions that Lars, Michael, and Bruce had started with in their subset group. And then I know Kitty added some comments to it, and Ethan and Peter added comments. And so, David, do you have any update for us on your thoughts on the survey itself?
So I've looked at the material. I've also looked at, I don't know if you remember, I think Leslie, you circulated the survey that was done in Sconset.
What?
So I suppose what I'd like to do is just have a little discussion about the nature of the survey that we want to do. So the draft that was circulated has like 3 or 4 questions. It's very, very, very short. The Sconset survey has 62 questions. And many of them, not all of them, but many of them would apply to us. Actually, there might be some interest. It might be of some value to repeat some of their questions to do compare and contrast. But they have questions. Actually, let me run through the categories. They have a bunch of questions about road safety. They have a bunch of questions about parking. I don't think that will apply to. Well, maybe it will. They have a lot of questions about parking. I don't think we're going to ask a lot of questions about parking. They have questions about bike safety. They have questions about noise. And when I say questions, like 5, 6, 8 questions in each of these categories. They have questions about outdoor lighting. They have questions about erosion. They have questions about emergency services, cultural and natural resources, commercial establishments, visitor amenities, private pools, affordable housing, postal service, and then tell us about yourself. So I suppose, so what I'd be interested to hear people's thoughts on is that the kind of survey we want to do? So it's broad, it covers a broad range of topics, but it's going to require some tenacity for people to complete the survey. I will say they had more than 500 respondents for every single question. So
Out of how many?
Did you get the emails that I sent out regarding the various subjects that our small survey group had been bouncing back and forth? There are about 4 or 5 emails that I shared. I hope you got those.
I did, but I can't be certain that I've necessarily got everything lined up correctly. I did get a bunch of emails from you, and I can go back and look at them.
Okay, because I think one of them discussed that particular item where there are certain questions that were asked out in Sconset that would not apply to Madiket and some that would. And we have some new concerns, like you mentioned, the bicycles and the bicycle paths. We're experiencing motorized vehicles now on the bike path. And do we like that in Madiket? Do we like bicycles that can do 35 miles an hour on our bike paths and motorized skateboards and things like that? All things I think that we should be thinking about for our survey.
Lars, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just David, and thanks for taking on that organizational task. I appreciate it. When we talked about it, we all concluded none of us are survey experts, but our kind of mini consensus, we didn't know how many surveys we were going to do, whether it was a couple or not, but we were leaning, and we can still, of course, discuss this, on doing, I don't know, 2 or 3 modest surveys rather than one massive survey, and kind of prioritize what we're trying to accomplish here. Everything you just mentioned is interesting, but we're much more interested in density, for instance, than we are in parking. Not to diminish parking, it's a pet peeve of mine, but it's, so we were trying to figure out a way to kind of prioritize it. I think we all came to the conclusion that the biggest thing that we want to try to have an impact on is the upcoming density of the sewer. So Bruce or Michael, chime in, or anyone. Did I summarize that about right? We didn't conclude.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I mentioned I have a friend who's not a professional survey person, but has done a lot of it in business, who actually is a Sconset resident. And we talked about the Sconset survey. He was not involved in that, but his suggestion to us was just guidelines, knowing we hadn't actually produced one yet. He said we should probably aim, if we're going to do this sequentially over a not too long period of time, 2 surveys would be kind of optimal. If we really needed to go, we really had things we had to drill down on, maybe 3 surveys maximum. He said you should be able to do the survey in 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. He said we probably 25 to 30 questions is fine, but above that, you're starting to push your luck from several perspectives. One of which is people not filling it out, others doing it in a less than thoughtful way. So he said you want to make sure that that people are going to pay attention to it and answer it in a helpful fashion. He also suggested that it should be multiple choice and leave the option open, maybe with some of the questions where if someone wanted to write a qualitative comment about something below, that can sometimes be very helpful, but don't design questions that require someone to write out an answer. He said sometimes someone feels strongly enough about something, they'll give you the multiple choice answer that you asked for, whatever it is, and then they'll give you an additional thought. He said sometimes those could be very helpful, but he said he doesn't have the bandwidth or time to design one for us or with us, but he would be more than happy for us to show him what we've got, and he'll give us some feedback. But maybe in a case like that, you might cover, there are 9 elements to the master plan. One of them, of course, is the introduction. Another one is the conclusion. Some of those are not really relevant to how many surveys you want to do, but his feeling was if you want to explore 2 areas or 3 areas in one survey, that's maybe practical. It's very hard to do a zoning survey where you're really getting into the weeds because you first people have to know what you're talking about. He did comment that in the survey, opening it with an introduction, and if you're talking about some subject matter, having a paragraph or 2 to create context or explanatory material can be very helpful. but you've got to tread very lightly. You've got to be careful that you're providing information that's neutral in nature. So that, number one, from our standpoint, we're not steering, but certainly you wouldn't want the town to be able to come back and say, this stuff is rubbish. You're trying to direct people to a set of answers. So those were his general comments. And, we felt initially when we were talking last summer, or early fall, pressured to deal with density, thinking we would have to go before town meeting in the fall with questions or with citizens petitions. And we realized we didn't have to do that. We held off on actually drafting it. I think, at least my feeling is, and I think that Lars, when you and Bruce and I have talked about this, the feeling was we really need that. We need the principal report as a basis. If we're going to look at density, I think we need to at least see that and see what it's telling us. Assuming, we feel it's a comprehensive factual report. I'm sure it will be, but.
Leslie?
Yes, with those guidances from Michael's friend, and also perusing the Tom Nevers and the Sconset questionnaires, I would like to begin by asking the preliminary questions to ask for more information about who's filling it out. I feel that the different parts of Madiket have different perspectives. So if you live near Millie's, for instance, parking is really important to you. But if you live on Long Pond Drive, not so much. Originally, when Bruce drafted something, he asked about where your property is located. I also think we can learn from the Tom Nevers group in that they ask, tell us about yourself. Are you a homeowner? Let's begin with that. And the question and the answers were yes, rent, stay with family, or stay with friends. I think that's really key to know whether someone's a homeowner or not. And then another one, if you own a home, do you rent it? Or is it a guest house? Or
Leslie, the Sconset one has those questions too. Were they
Yes,
cooperating?
I'm reading this from the Sconset question. But I'm just trying, and how long do you stay in Madiket each year? That's another way of getting whether you're a seasonal person or a summer person or an absentee owner.
The survey committee has kind of looked at this, and we think at least some of us think it's important to have a little section generally stating, tell us a little about yourself. They don't have to particularly give their name or their address when they answer, but they simply can say, yes, I'm a property owner. I rent my house.
Exactly.
I'm a seasonal resident. I'm a year-round resident, things of that nature. And I think those are important questions to have, just as Sconset did.
I think we can just lift them from Sconset. They seem to have done a good job. We don't need to reinvent that wheel.
I
Five
agree.
questions. Five questions.
Yes. And then the thing that Tom Nevers did, which I also think we could incorporate, is they ask you what subgroup, what sub area you are from. So in Tom Nevers, it is, are you from Tom Nevers East? Are you from Tom Nevers South? So Bruce had something in this originally about, are you a Smith's Point person? Are you a Fisher's Landing person? Are you a Tristram's Landing person? And because I do think that people's opinions will vary by their neighborhood. And so I would suggest that we incorporate the neighborhood aspect. Please identify which part of Madiket you live in or you spend time in. And then that allowed Tom Nevers to segment the answers.
Yeah.
That, Tom Nevers East felt strongly about this, but Tom Nevers Road could care less.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah,
we
if-
have that same information.
To your point, if we were asking a question about coastal erosion, Smith's Point would come at it very differently than someone, fishes, well, on Madaket Road further in,
Yep.
Well, given that this is a public open meeting, we probably don't need to debate all the questions right here. But I'm thinking, based on the fact that we've got two good surveys that we can learn from and borrow from, maybe David, maybe that could help be the first plan to come up with what you think the 25 or 30 questions would be.
Can I just, sure, absolutely. I think that's the next step. But just one thing though, I like the idea of focusing on 2 or 3 areas relative to the master plan. So
Yes.
per survey, that makes a whole lot of sense. So any thoughts about which ones we would prioritize?
Here's a suggestion. Since we've had a few calls, I should say, where Lars, Bruce, myself, Leslie have talked about this stuff kind of conceptually, but we're waiting for the results of the principal group. I would suggest, as we're starting to home in on this, that maybe if we could budget a group call of 4 or 5 of us, a subgroup, not a public meeting, but just a work group where we could budget an hour or two and actually try to bang out something in format. So rather than one person having an approach and then it's circulating it and it getting chopped up 6 different ways, it might be more productive if we can each afford to contribute a couple of hours to that discussion. We could do a Zoom session and try to format something, then circulate it to this group, a larger group, and begin to refine it.
David, to your point of the master plan things, the number one would be land use.
Yeah.
Which is all about density and zoning and open land.
Yep.
Those are 3 categories that
Lars has his hand up.
I think, and again, our little group discussed this, but I think step 1 is outline the 6 or 7 or 8 topics we may want to cover in a couple of surveys and then prioritize those. Our feeling was we'll get a higher response rate on the first survey than the second survey, probably.
Correct.
So I think, Michael, your idea is excellent. Let's have a work group as soon as we can and come up with whatever the 6, 7, 8 bigger topics are, prioritize them, and then we can start building out 3 or 4 questions under each topic.
So what I'd be happy to do is, why don't I pull together questions from the other 2 surveys that appear to be germane, and distribute that to this smaller group so that we have a starting point, and then get together and go through them, edit them, delete them, add to them or whatever, but just so we don't start with a blank piece of paper.
I would also suggest, to Lars's point, that before we have that call, every person on this call now could just take a look at the master plan categories and rate them, prioritize them yourself and send it in, distribute it to everyone. And we could come in and we can kind of, we can cross-ref what we're seeing to help us have an idea as to how we want to stack the priority.
Good.
That sounds like a good approach. Peter?
Quick question, David, this I think is to you. From the perspective that, and I know I've maybe beating a dead horse here, but we kind of only have one shot at this. The town has said to us, if we want to make changes to zoning laws, we have to really have the town of Madiket behind us. The 62 question survey, you said they got 500 respondents. Do you know what percentage that was of? Okay. Do you know on the Tom Nevers survey, any numbers like? So my point being, a 62 question survey probably doesn't get the same percentage response as a 10 question survey. And we need to find that place where people won't lose interest before they send it in.
It's a very good point. So who would know that?
Well, Peter, my friend in the survey, I can't call him the guru, but the consultant, had said, stop at 30 questions. Don't go beyond 30. He said 25, you're going to get good response. Again, stay multiple choice, so that people can, it's up to the quality of the question so they can go through it and give you good information. So when you get above that, he said they should be able to do it thoughtfully in 10 to 15 minutes. And if somebody really has something that they're concerned about, you can either leave open-ended area for written questions or comments at the back, or some questions you may want to, every question you could have after multiple choice, any other thoughts you want to share with us.
I think the success we have in getting responses is going to be predicated on how we present the survey. And I'd like to suggest that David and the small survey work group perhaps have a couple of sessions amongst the work group, and we come up with some ideas that we can bounce off the rest of the Madiket area plan group once we've come to a better format, and we agree that this is something that it would be more acceptable to our community. And I like Leslie's idea that even though Madiket is a large community, 500-600 properties, that there are within that different areas. There's the old historic district, there's the Millie's district, there are folks that are on the coast that are concerned about coastal erosion and sea level rise. Many people are concerned about the landfill. Let's try to get organized before we have another big group meeting so that we can make a better presentation, I think. What do you guys think?
Well, Bruce, I think if all of us here over the weekend just prioritize the sections of the map, the town plan, and just rate them, what's most important to least important, and share that amongst our group, we could actually, we could put together a call next week and have a work group. Maybe it's a preliminary work group once we got that information and start to shape it. It's probably, we're not going to come out with the U.S. Constitution out of 1 2-hour meeting, but we can begin to shape something. I think that we can then put out for responses.
Well,
So-
make a little motion here then that.
Well, David made a suggestion, which also it wouldn't hurt before our meeting if you culled out what you think are the 10 or 15 or 20 most important questions.
Yeah, from the other surveys. Yeah.
But our priorities, I think, will whatever consensus we arrive at is going to drive a lot of how the first survey goes out. Because we don't want to bite off more than we can chew in terms of putting out, covering too many areas and making the thing too long.
Right.
I'd like to make a suggestion. We've kind of talked this issue to death, and I don't think we're going to resolve anything until David and the small survey group get their teeth into this. Let's wait a day or 2 or 3 and see what happens, and we'll get back together, and perhaps we can move on to the agenda item 5 at this point.
Can I ask, can you raise your hand if you think you're in the small group? Peter, Lars, Leslie, Michael, okay.
Historically, it has been Leslie, Bruce, Lars, and myself, and I think
Ethan Devine.
Ethan Devine.
And now you, David.
Okay. I have one other question. What kind of shape are we in terms of email addresses and cell phone numbers and things like that? Is that a project that we need to work on, or are we in good shape?
We're in good shape with that.
We're in good shape.
We don't have your private numbers.
So I think we have a plan for the next immediate steps for the survey subgroup, right?
And the other thing I would ask is, again, if we could keep up, I'll call it pleasantly persistent encouragement on the principal group product. It seemed, I thought it was going to be a preliminary in September, October, and a final by the end of the year, and we haven't seen either.
I just want to remind David, he might not know about this, but we actually have a SurveyMonkey account that we can use to format some of these questions and the multiple choice answers with a comment section and even a preliminary section before the question. So I'd like to suggest that I will help you with that if you want to use that format, but I think that's very handy for what we want to do.
Yeah, I think for execution, initially, I think we can just do it talking and notes, but ultimately, it's a great way to get it done and make it easy for the users too.
And it's really easy to compile all the results.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I think that's a good point.
I'm quite familiar with it, so yeah, we can. But I didn't know we had an account. That's great.
Yes.
I'm reading the Tom Nevers information as I'm listening. They had 8 focus groups and they had 40 people participate.
Wow.
And they ran their survey in 2006, a detailed property owner survey. The response to this survey was 40.2%, which they say
That's not too bad, you know. And I think, Leslie, I think 2 of those focus groups were on the same subject.
could be. I don't know.
Bill is not on the call now. Just a question about a tangential area. I'm curious how many residents in Madiket, assuming we have 500 plus or minus, how many of those people pay dues to MCA? What percent? Do you know?
Hi.
MCA has Bill, you probably have this number in your head. MCA
Yeah,
has
we
what?
have,
300-ish?
we have about 200 membership that's, you know, full paid membership.
So
Then
we're
we
at
have-
40%.
Then we have about 250 to 300 interval ownership across in your neck of the woods. And they pay through what's the Mayfair Realty or Mainstay.
Mainstay, yeah.
Yeah, so part of their interval ownership, and so we have them separated out as partial membership. They're not full membership, but they, you know, they get all the newsletters and stuff. So we send out, our newsletters go out to about 500 people.
So Bill, of the 500, 250 are the interval owners?
About that, yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize it was that high.
Well, see, all I have to do is rent 1 week and they become,
Right,
know.
right.
and some of those change, obviously, if somebody doesn't come back, and
Yeah.
so they give us a percentage of their membership, whatever it is.
Yeah, Melissa Murphy is very helpful with that. And these interval owners, just because someone rents for 2 weeks from an interval doesn't make them an owner of that interval piece. It just makes them a renter, just as if someone rented their seasonal house for 2 weeks through Airbnb. That Airbnb renter would not be a Madiket resident.
I think we need to add a category to describe yourself, which is interval owner.
I think that's a
Yes,
good point.
I agree.
Yes.
Very different perspective than a full-time owner.
And then also, in addition to the current MCA members, the Fisher's Landing has about 80 lots. And so I don't know exactly how big their database is, but it's probably at least 80 names. And some of those people might already be MCA members, but I don't think many of them are.
And Tom Erickson might be able to tell us about the Smith Point folks too. He knows how many people are there, and most of those people are seasonal residents.
So
I'm covering for Tom at the moment. This is Jen Erickson. I'll have him jump back in when he comes back.
Thank you, Jen.
thank you. So if we're talking 500 Madiket, which is inclusive of the interval owners, we're also talking another 80 Fisher's Landing and another X for Smith's Point.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
some of the Smith Point people have joined the MCA proper, and then Tom takes the email and he sends it to their membership anyhow. So, they're getting it.
I think the 500 number is a good number because that's the number of septic systems that the Board of Health several years ago said that they had tested when they said they had completed the testing of all of the septic systems in Madiket.
And Bruce, does that include Fisher's Landing?
Yes, it included Fisher's Landing and it included the tight tanks on the other side of Millie's Bridge. So I think that's a fairly good number. And of course, when you add in, for example, when they tested a septic system, for example, down the street from us at Goose Cove Way, and they tested one septic, but there were 5 interval owners. The same way at some of the townhouses, when there's a 5-unit townhouse structure that are on one common septic. So it's a fairly accurate number, but there are exceptions or qualifications to it. But I think 500 is an interesting number for Madiket.
Well, before we adjourn, is there any other business that we need to talk about at this meeting?
No, other than I think Evan has a good idea on starting the survey process this weekend. But let's maybe not on this call, but real quickly, let's figure out a day next week we can
Yeah.
get a Zoom call.
I
Let's
think we
maybe
could set
launch
that
into a
up via
kickoff
email.
call.
There are so many Smiths Points.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Well,
you. Have a
thank you.
nice weekend.
Oh, one
Make a
other note I
motion to
wanted to
adjourn.
raise.
Motion to
Before
adjourn.
we have been in existence officially for exactly a year. That was the January 7th, 2021 was the date that we wrote to the planning board asking for permission to get this group constituted. So happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary. I'd like to
Our anniversary is Insurrection +1.
I'd like to make an official motion that we adjourn and wish you all a healthy 2022. And David, I'm going to send you an email so we can try to get a little organized.
Is there a second?
Diana?
Here. Thank
Did
you.
somebody say something?
Yes, Diana,
Yes, Tom?
just before you close out, I had to run my dog out. There's 25 houses on Smiths Point and 25 of them of our members. And this year, so far, we have 18, but we're just looking for the other 7, and then we might be more. So we're like half of that. So we'll be, and also if the survey goes out, we'd love to send it to the Smiths Point people.
Thank you. Thank you. We will ask you to do that. Okay, so we have a motion from Bruce to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
David seconds. Raise your hand if you agree. I say Bob, Peter, Lars, Bruce, Leslie, David, Michael, and Tom, and me. Thank you, everyone. Talk soon.
Thanks, Dave.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Diana.